Hello, BookTube. Well, you wrote in and you signed petitions and you went door to door, and some of you even marched in the streets, but it didn't work. It's once again the return of Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a weekly feature that Michael K Vaughan and I do where we talk about comic books. And it started out innocently as a feature on his channel. And I saw it and horned my way in. Because of that, the price I pay is that he picks what we talk about, which is why we haven't been talking about the Legion of Superheroes every week in and week out for years. And he picked our kickoff for Epic Comic Book Wednesday this year, and it is Captain Marvel. He picked Captain Marvel. And in this case, I want to stress, I'm sure that Mike will also stress this in his video. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure that he will, that we are not talking about the real Captain Marvel. Now, all of you comment when it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday that you like listening to the two or three of you who watch these videos. You like listening to us talk about comic books, but what you really like is when we argue or when we disagree on something. And there may be disagreements on today's subject, but one thing I feel certain he and I will agree on is that when we are talking about the Captain Marvel that we're talking about today, we're not talking about the real Captain Marvel. The real Captain Marvel is Billy Batson, a little boy named Billy Batson, who gains the ability to transform into a character named Captain Marvel. The big red cheese. Sure that you know the character. Some of you who know comics at all know the character. He's one of, I would say, 3 or 4 or 5 comic book characters that have universal instant recognizability, even though he has a more checkered past than most of the others. For a long time, he was the best-selling superhero comic book. I hate to say that because he outsold Superboy, which outsold Superman. But nevertheless, it's true. And then, so we have a bit of complicated lore to go through here. But it will make sense in the end, I promise. He was a really good selling character during World War II. And then those sales started to, they held strong for a while. Then they started to taper off. And at the same time, a guy at Marvel Comics realized, probably after 4 or 5 gin and tonics, that the name Captain Marvel is the name of the company, Marvel Comics, but Captain Marvel doesn't belong to Marvel Comics. And a whole bunch of legal maneuvers were kicked into motion. Was it possible, for instance, for Marvel to buy Captain Marvel from Fawcett Comics or DC Comics or whoever currently owned the character? And if not, was it possible to put the kibosh on the character? The character had already been silenced by DC Comics as a copyright infringement on Superman, which I think is absurd, but it worked. And so this character's out there in legal limbo when Marvel decided to strike. They decided to, here is a limping fawn in the forest, let us strike. Let us seize the right to have a character named Captain Marvel, just as you could assume that if Marvel Comics in the 1960s had a character called Captain DC, DC, had it had deep enough legal pockets, would have sued to get the rights to that character. That worked. And Marvel started coming out with a character named Captain Marvel. But because the decision to do that was made in a boardroom, it was made in a legal and law offices, it was not made creatively at all. The decision for Marvel to have its own character named Captain Marvel did not come about organically. It was a legal decision. It was a top-down corporate decision. And so it was inherently lifeless. Those are lifeless decisions. And somebody at Marvel was just handed this lifeless corpse and told, animate it. Do the best you can. Animate it. We got this thing. We're gonna do this anyway. You didn't come up with the idea. The fans didn't ask for the idea. It's not an organic process in any way. We're just gonna do this. So do it, or you're fired. And I'll find somebody who will do it. And so Captain Marvel in the Marvel lineup was born in the late 1960s in a Marvel showcase comic book called Marvel Superheroes. We got the first appearance of a character named Captain Marvel. And right away, Marvel Comics started lying about that character. The advertising arm of Marvel also very dead in the eyes, also not organic, was told by the powers that be, hype this thing. And so they started calling, almost from the beginning, they started calling this new Captain Marvel, Marvel's newest sensation. Captain Marvel for Marvel. Marvel's Captain Marvel was never a sensation. They called him that anyway, and after a couple of appearances in Marvel Superheroes, they gave him his own comic book. That usually took a long time. Talk to the Hulk if you want a resentful opinion about how long it takes you to loiter in some collecting issue before you get your own comic. Talk to the Submariner. Talk to a whole bunch of Marvel characters, but nope. Corporate was in on it. So Captain Marvel had to have his own book pretty soon. There had to be that name on the cover for legal reasons, not for organic reasons. It wasn't like fans were mobbing the studio with letters saying, "Oh my God, we've got to have a Captain Marvel comic book." That wasn't happening. So Captain Marvel got his own first issue. Now I want to show you the digital version here. There's Captain Marvel #1. Notice some things about this issue, the things that I noticed in 1968 when this came out on the spinner rack of the dry goods store where I got my comics. That is a Gene Colan cover, but it is a bad Gene Colan cover. But notice other things about it. Just the cover. Just what we're talking about. Just the cover. First of all, look at the lame-ass costume. It's some guy in white and green, and he's got a ringed planet as his symbol. And there's a ringed planet on the cover. And his name is Captain Marvel. And the lettering, I don't know if you can see it here, but the lettering is poorly done. The perspective of the letters leaping off you is uneven. It's different on the bottom word as on the top word. And the letters themselves are uneven. In size, they're poorly aligned. It's just a crappy cover. It was obviously just a Gene Colan sketch, and somebody filled in some planetary background. Nevertheless, it was meant to be. It was insisted that it had to happen. So a story had to be arrived at. Who are the people involved here? Roy Thomas. Stan Lee probably overseeing just a bit, but Roy Thomas had to come up with this idea. Now, to the limited extent that there is any creative interest or originality in the origin of Marvel's Captain Marvel, you have to lay it at the feet of Roy Thomas, who I believe is the greatest comic book writer ever. He thought up an idea for this character, and the idea originated with the Fantastic Four, where in one of their issues they fight a giant robot, a giant android called the Sentry, which had been left behind on Earth by a spacefaring race called the Kree, an aggressive warrior species called the Kree, who look human, but they aren't. They're just a race of space humans, a very, very boring way to do extraterrestrials, but Roy Thomas was playing with the hand he was dealt, and he thought, well, the Fantastic Four defeat the Sentry. Wouldn't the Kree be interested in that? Wouldn't they know about it? Wouldn't there be some sort of signal that was sent? And wouldn't they send somebody? Wouldn't they send a spacecraft to Earth to investigate that? That and a couple of other things are the kernel of this new Captain Marvel, who is actually a Kree warrior named Captain Mar-Vell, M-A-R-V-E-L-L. That just happens to be his name, Captain Mar-Vell. So we will call this that, so I don't have to say the Marvel Captain Marvel over and over and over again. He comes to Earth with his commander, Jan Rog, and their communications director's name starts with U. So it must be Uhura. Oh no, it's not Uhura, it's Una. They come to Earth to investigate. We are told that Captain Mar-Vell is an extremely famous Kree warrior. We're told in a later issue, I wonder how quickly I can get to it here. It's not in the first issue. No, it's not in the first issue. Well, we will look at the first issue, but I want to show you because the panel, yeah, here we go. There is a Skrull leader reminiscing about the hero that Captain Mar-Vell was for the Kree. What are we told here? Well do our war annals recall how fiercely, how valorously he fought against us in the war for control of the satellite galaxy NGC-205. In our age-old enemy, if our age-old enemies have sent a battle hero such as he to Earth, it must be of vast importance to them. We must learn why. So they don't care about the Sentry, and they don't care about Yon-Rogg, and they don't care about the rest of the Kree. They just care about this man. He is a legend among the Skrulls. So that opens up a kernel of possibilities there. We don't know, for instance, how old Captain Mar-Vell is. If he's had this long military career, he's probably quite old. He's probably at least middle-aged. There's a lot of texture there. There's a lot that you could play with, especially in the late 1960s, when it was becoming really evident to everybody, certainly Roy Thomas knew it and said it many times, that a war hero isn't the same thing as a hero. Often, they're the opposite. That opens up all sorts of possibilities. In this storyline, and for an unbelievable length of time in the run of Captain Marvel, Mar-Vell is just an agent of the Kree. He's forever reminding other people and himself of that, forever saying, I'm a loyal man of the Kree. It doesn't matter that I'm here. It doesn't even matter that I don't particularly like my commander. Yon-Rogg is a worm who has romantic designs on Una, who has romantic designs on Captain Mar-Vell. So you've got a classic Stan Lee, Roy Thomas love triangle there. Very fruitful, even though the basic premise is very boring. Mar-Vell is basically a human man. It's just he's from another galaxy. There's almost no effort made to make him alien in any convincing way. There's almost no effort made to make him strange, even, or to give him any odd set of powers. He comes to Earth from a planet. We don't know what planet that is. Is he from the home world of the Kree? Do we know much about his past? No, not really. Has he ever been married? Has he lost comrades? I presume he's lost lots of them. When he's on Earth, he's stronger than a normal human. Sound familiar? He's an alien on Earth whose superpowers come from the fact that he's stronger than a normal human. But he's not much stronger than a normal human. We're told in issue, I think, number 3 or 4 of Captain Marvel, he's fighting the Sentry. And he lifts up an I-beam from a construction site in order to hit the Sentry with it. For some reason, he doesn't know that that's not going to hurt the Sentry. If anybody knows about this creature, why isn't it Captain Mar-Vell? He seems totally nonplussed. But when he's doing that, he says, this is the absolute limit of my unearthly strength on Earth. Average I-beam weighs 1,000 pounds. That makes him far, far weaker than most Marvel superheroes, and utterly, hopelessly outmatched by the Sentry, much less any other character that he meets. And that's it. And that's accompanied by a lot of weaknesses. He knows Earth languages, at least English, and he knows Earth customs. We don't get much, or if anything, about him learning those things. That also is an opportunity wasted. But he can't breathe Earth's atmosphere. He needs to take a special potion every hour, or he stops being able to breathe Earth's atmosphere. Because Stanley and, to a limited extent, Roy Thomas, like to work in an organic weakness for the hero, something that sets the clock on them. It can't be just a systemic weakness. Oh, I'm not fond of pecan pie. It has to be, I've got X amount of time, or my weakness will spell my downfall. And originally, that weakness for Mar-Vell is that he can't breathe Earth's atmosphere. He needs to take his potion, mix it with tap water every hour, or he will start to, I guess, asphyxiate, or I guess he'll die. You see that pattern reflected over and over again. It was very common, even during wartime, that was the limit for the Submariner, for instance. He could only exist for an hour on land before he started to lose his powers or even die, depending on who the author was. Of course, the famous example is Thor, who, if he lets go of his magic hammer, has 60 seconds before he reverts to his human form. That was true here. It's often honored in the Breach. It's not remembered very often. And for these first few issues, you get Gene Colan artwork. And it's not good Gene Colan artwork. Most of it is bad and clunky and crowded. Look at that. That's ridiculous. That's a bad panel. This is a bad way to do it. It's not Gene Colan caring much about what he does. Michael and I have praised Gene Colan's artwork many, many times in Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Most probably in connection with Tomb of Dracula, where he does his best work, but also with other comics, but not here. Here you're just getting Gene Colan. If you're a fan, you're going to want this. But and you can see there's a blonde woman in the background who is pleading with him and worried about him. She's human. And that character is called Carol Danvers. She's an official at Cape Kennedy, at the U.S. space station, which it becomes involved with Captain Marvel right away. She's going to come in handy later in this video. This is not the last time we're going to hear about Carol Danvers, but she's all through these issues. She becomes see, look at that. Soldiers banging on a force field. That is bad Gene Colan artwork. That's just, there's no other way to put it. I love the guy's work, but please. Carol Danvers, for a while in these issues, becomes a kind of Lois Lane, oh, if he likes this alien woman, he'll never marry me figure. It's a really, really bad. It's really, really, really derivative. I mean, to be doing this stuff on the brink of 1970, the brave new world that was 1970, how incredibly disappointing. And the reason why is because there was a corporate gun to Roy Thomas's head. Roy Thomas can do a whole lot better work than this. Doesn't matter. Gene Colan probably was given almost no time to do these issues. But we keep going. In the second issue, for instance, Captain Marvel fights the Super Skrull. Ridiculous. Just ridiculous. He has these dinky little laser beam wrist things that he can fire. As far as I know, in the entire course of his time using them, they never hurt anybody. But he fights the Super Skrull. The Skrull are age-old enemies of the Kree. And they used their science to create a being called the Super Skrull who has all the powers of the Fantastic Four at the same time. If the Super Skrull learned that a Kree warrior was on Earth, that Kree warrior would last about 5 seconds. The Super Skrull can lift 85 tons, not 1 ton, and can reach Nova intensity heat. And unlike the Human Torch of the Fantastic Four, is going to have no qualms about simply blasting the skin and bones off a living being. And on top of all that, the Super Skrull can turn invisible and use Mr. Fantastic's stretching powers to strike you with a 85-ton strong, invulnerable fist of the Thing that is also 2,000 degrees Kelvin, and that's invisible, and can use Mr. Fantastic's stretching ability to do that from half a mile away. In other words, as I've said many times before, every time the Super Skrull has come up, he would be unbeatable. He certainly would be able to mop the floor with an ordinary Kree warrior. Captain Marvel doesn't have any superpowers. He's just an ordinary Kree warrior. He might be legendary, but that's because he was in a military setting. But we had men, we had equipment and whatnot. But it doesn't matter. They keep putting him up against one foe after another, including in issue 4. Typically, issue 4 of any Marvel launch is when you will get a guest star. It's by issue 4 that readers know whether or not they want to read your comic, and it might need a little boost in the arm. By issue 4, everybody that was reading Captain Marvel, Marvel's spaceborne sensation, everybody that was reading this comic by then was saying, "Nah, this is not worth. This is 12 cents. That's big money. I'm not going to pay that for this. This is boring and muddled and derivative." So by issue number 4, you want to bring in a guest star. Here they bring in the Submariner. Then there is another bad Gene Colan cover where I think they're dancing. I think that's what they're doing there. Where Captain Marvel not only fights the Submariner, who can lift 85 tons, and who has been a warrior at least as long as Marvel has been. He not only fights the Submariner to more or less a standstill, but they do it underwater. Marvel would not have a chance. Throughout the run of this comic, lasted for dozens and dozens of issues. Throughout the run of the comics, they are always pitting Marvel against characters he can't beat. He doesn't have a chance of beating. He can't beat the Super Skrull. He does, but he can't. He can't beat the Submariner. He doesn't here. He can't beat the Hulk. He's put up against the Hulk twice. It's ridiculous. But after issue number 4, you get dire hints of how badly this comic was doing because Gene Colan leaves. The artist leaves. And is it possible that the writer leaves as well? Yeah, the writer does leave. Roy Thomas leaves in favor of someone we'll just call Arnold Drake. And Gene Colan leaves in favor of an artist named Don Heck, who I like, but he's workmanlike. I think he doesn't get the credit that he deserves for some of his good layouts. Let me see if I can get you an example of that. It won't be easy with these. See, there's Carol Danvers again. I want you to notice one thing about Carol Danvers, the character Carol Danvers in these issues. One thing that will come up later in this interminable video, which is that she is a woman. But you get Captain Marvel fighting the monster of the week and forgetting that he needs to take a potion every hour or he will suffocate in Earth's atmosphere, and it just gets worse and worse. You will occasionally have still a Gene Colan cover, but it's going to be Don Heck artwork on the inside for a lot of these issues, and that I'm not saying that is a great come down in the neighborhood, but you don't want to go any lower than that. Don Heck is about as good as a workman comic book artist can get. I really like him, but I realize that his work is stiff and often unimaginative. It's often panel after panel of very static talking heads. So if you've got a comic by an untried new character whose name is Marvel, and he quickly realizes that there's a cognate in English called Marvel, so he starts to be known as Captain Marvel. Earth people start to think, well, there's a new superhero around, and his name is Captain Marvel. They don't know anything most of them don't know anything about his Kree heritage. They don't know anything about the fact that he was actually sent to Earth for not exactly friendly reasons. But as we move on, let me see. Here we go. Here's another example where Captain Marvel is completely outclassed. He's fighting Iron Man. But nevertheless, in this issue, we have moved on from Don Heck to Frank Springer. And it's not Frank Springer in the fullness of his talent, nor is it Frank Springer with a good inker. Instead, it's Frank Springer inked by Vinnie Coletta. And it's bad. The artwork here is really, really bad. Let me get you an example. It's not going to help any. Yeah, this is the fight scene between him and just punch him straight in the face. Because, that's where his nose is. Oh, wait, he's wearing an armored mask. This is just really bad. There are no backgrounds. There's no sense of dynamic whatsoever. And that has always been my yardstick for when a fledgling comic is on the rocks. When the art teams start not only to cycle through so that it's different in every 2 issues, but also that they're not the best artists. You start off with Gene Colan, who's one of the great comic book artists, and a little later on in some of these issues, I don't remember where it is, so I'm not sure. Oh my God, look at this fight scene. I could literally draw that myself. But later on, I'll never be able to find it just by randomly looking for it. Here's an imaginative info dump. If you've got a character that just has to learn a lot, why not just write it? Just write it all as a panel. That info dump takes place during one of the many editorial attempts to goose up this character. Along the line, somebody somewhere realized, I don't know if it was Roy Thomas, he might be gone by now, but somebody somewhere along the line realized that this character is a zero. This character is just boring, incredibly boring. And so we need to do something about it. We need to fix this character somehow. Now, I'm kind of curious to see if I can find... There are a few panels, just fugitive panels, that we get that are drawn by John Buscema, and they are wonderful. They give you a sort of a hint of what it would be like if Buscema had drawn it. But somewhere along the line, somebody at Marvel decided we need to do something with this. This is not working. Our Captain Marvel that we imposed on readers, told them they would like this character, told them they would love this character. We told you, the writers and the artists, do it. But here's a dead body. Bring this thing to life. But this isn't working. Whether you didn't have the fire in the belly or whether it was a bad idea from launch, we need to fix this. We need to fiddle with this character. So early on, a couple of efforts are made to increase his powers at the very least. Make him more powerful than just a guy who can jump 20 feet. but who needs to drink, Alka-Seltzer before he can, or he'll suffocate. Something needs to be done about that. So at the end of one issue, which issue was it? Issue number 16, I think. At the end of issue number 16, Captain Marvel gets a new costume. It's basically that. It ends up, that is the best that it ever looks. But then this is the supreme intelligence of the leader of the civilian leader of the Kree Empire, bestowing on Captain Marvel a different identity, a new identity. He won't specifically be part of the military anymore. Instead, he'll have a new set of powers. So he gets that costume and he gets sent back to Earth. And when he is sent back to Earth, he falls into the hands not only of more dastardly villains, but also another great comic book artist, a comic book artist who's even greater than Gene Colan, and that is Gil Kane. Gil Kane was convinced to come on board this ailing comic book title and draw Captain Marvel. And when Gil Kane got his hands on the character, suddenly there was a reason to buy this comic. That I remember this all vividly, where I went through the process that I'm describing. I went through it organically. I bought the first few appearances, Marvel Superheroes, and then Captain Marvel's own comic, because of Gene Colan. When Gene Colan left, so did I. But I kept an eye on the thing. I saw it when it came on the stands, and when I saw that Gil Kane was joining, I started buying it again. I'm sure that happened with a whole bunch of readers. And when Gil Kane got his hands on the character, not only did he fall into the hands of more dastardly Earth villains, but Gil Kane also gayed up his costume. I want to show you. We'll do, actually, since we've got the digital here. That is the original iteration of this costume. Okay? Not a bad costume. A little bit generic still, but not as generic as the original green and white one. I want you to keep that in mind when I show you what Gil Kane did with that costume. Suddenly, Captain Marvel's costume is the single gayest superhero costume this side of the Silver Age Green Lantern. It was impossible to ignore. It really was. It was impossible to ignore. Let me see if, we also get the return of Rick Jones, who has been pilloried on Epic Comic Book Wednesday many, many times by yours truly, a professional sidekick who I ripped apart in the Avengers. He's introduced, and Gil Kane has a weird time drawing him. At the same time that Kane was doing this, he was drawing occasional issues of the Teen Titans, and he's also doing weird things with them as well. Take a look at this. What on earth is this? I don't know. But a weird concatenation of events causes Rick Jones to become meshed with Captain Marvel. So it was a distinct, bratty callback to the real Captain Marvel, where when Rick Jones slams his bracelets together, he changes places with Captain Marvel. As close as Billy Batson saying his magic word as you can get. And when Rick Jones slams his bracelets together for the first time and Captain Marvel appears in his place to have adventures on Earth, we get our first real glimpse of what Gil Kane does to that new costume. Hubba, hubba, hubba. And Marvel has all sorts of adventures. His very first one, he realizes, oh my God, we are the same person. These magic bracelets are causing us to exchange places. And you think, all right, this is a new editorial decision. This is a new direction for this character. So that's great. Maybe he'll be interesting now. There's Jan Rog, his nefarious commander. And what's the very first thing that happens? Oh, he was too slow. Oof, boom. So no, the character is still a loser. But something was coming. Now, look, I want to show you. We get these great Gil Kane covers and great Gil Kane artwork on the inside. Really, really good, energetic Gil Kane artwork. So if you are a fan of artists for Marvel and not writers, as I am, you were going to buy these issues. I did. And these issues, I want to remind you here, because I am eventually going to end this video. I want to remind you that the whole time that this was happening, even the appearance of Gil Kane was not really goosing sales all that much. And the whole time that was happening, Marvel was referring in Stan Lee's soapbox and in editorial pages and in in-house ads They were referring to Captain Marvel as Marvel's newest sensation. The character was certainly not a sensation. Fans were only tepidly interested. I want to stress that. And then something amazing happened. Every once in a while, this will happen. Those of you who are, for instance, Daredevil fans, why on earth? Re-examine your life. But if you are, Daredevil is a totally derivative, happy-go-lucky, wisecracking, costumed acrobat. A dime a dozen. And you don't really know why you're buying his comic, except, again, it's Gene Colan artwork. You're not really sure. Does anybody around him really buy this whole wheeze about how he has an identical twin brother or anything like that? Does any of this make any sense? He's just a guy. So what if he has radar sense? It's trundling along like that, and maybe you're getting Bob Brown to do some interesting artwork or a Gil Kane again. And then you get a writer-artist who comes onto the book, makes it a sensation, causes it to be popular with fans because he has a vision. And it's not the original vision at all. Suddenly Daredevil is a tormented, semi-mystical warrior who digs up dead bodies. And that writer-artist was Frank Miller. And it changed Daredevil forever. The same thing happened with Captain Marvel. It had been limping along, just this, I guess, he's kind of an alien. He has ray guns, pew pew, that sort of thing. And then a guy named Jim Starlin got his hands on the book. And I think must have done the mother of all pitches to the editorial board at Marvel. I think by this point, the powers that be, the legal powers that be, were no longer interested. The name Captain Marvel had appeared on Marvel products. That secures the copyright. So that secures the trademark. So if you do that, you are going to please those mirrored sunglasses executives, because they now know that if DC Comics or some other comic book were to try to come out with the real Captain Marvel, you could sue the pants off them. You have now come out with a regular comic called Captain Marvel. There's no way anyone else can do that. So I don't think they cared anymore. And the Marvel editorial board is probably wondering, well, what is this turkey? We have to keep printing it, but what is it? Nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to work on it. Sure sign that your comic is in trouble? There are two. If the choice of artists is a sign that your comic is in trouble, there are two that are surefire signs. One is George Tuska, and the other is Al Milgrom. If either one of those turns out to be the new comic book artist for your title, you should cancel your subscription, because it's not going to be around much longer. Although, and we'll see, there's one enormously other case here, something that even I didn't see coming. A guy named Jim Starlin took over Captain Marvel, the writing and the art and the covers. And he had a gradually evolving vision about this character. He wanted this character to be a cosmic warrior of the spaceways. And he realized early on that he needed two things to make that happen. One, a yet further revised power set. And two, a bad guy. Captain Marvel had no bad guys, other than Jan Rog, who was never actually exploited for all the worth that he could have been. Never. The original setup of Captain Marvel in Marvel had lots of potential, but it was never used. And Jan Rog dies a dumb, off-panel death. So his potential is completely wasted. But Jim Starlin came up with another villain, and you might recognize the name. The name was Thanos. A mad, half-titan being of immense physical power and metaphysical power, who also has an identity of his own. He doesn't just want to rob the Fifth Street Bank. He's in love with death. Erotically in love with death. And is constantly trying to find cosmic level powers in order to bring that to consummation, to kill everything in the universe, or almost everything in the universe. All this is gradual. It was all ad hoc. I don't think Thanos even made his debut in Captain Marvel. I think he debuted in some other comic. I want to say The Avengers or Iron Man. But soon, right away, you get the sense that you are watching. Here, let me show you. I want to show you some examples of what I'm talking about here. Some examples of maybe the early pages won't do it. We should go to a later issue. But Starlin immediately starts experimenting. At first, in these first couple of issues, he's given really strong inkers, including Dave Cockrum. I can't imagine a worse combination than Dave Cockrum inking Jim Starlin. Yeah, there we go. There's Thanos when he was still on a no-carb diet. Gradually, Starlin's work gets more and more complicated and more ambitious. You get fascinating panels like that. And also, I really want to... there's one particular panel that I want to show you. I'll never be able to find it. If I'm looking for it, I won't ever be able to find it. Starlin is he's really fond of these big exposition pages. He does them really well, but he does a lot of them. And you get the Super Skrull returns. Of course, this new Marvel would no more be able to beat the Super Skrull than the old Marvel was. But gradually, Starlin's artwork gets better and better. More and more detailed, more and more surreal. And more characters are introduced, including Drax the Destroyer, who is nothing like what you remember from the comics. As Thanos slowly but steadily tries to find objects that will vastly increase his powers. He's only marginally concerned with defeating Captain Marvel, or later the Avengers. He really wants a level of power that will make them irrelevant, including the Cosmic Cube. And this is just a constant quest for him to find those things. Look at that, huh? Classic Captain Marvel cover. Never thought you'd see that. But by this point, with Jim Starlin writing and drawing these things, by this point, everybody was reading this. But this was look at that. Just look at how incredible that is. By this point in the run, word of mouth had spread in the comics community and also in the newly born, the new dedicated comic shops that were starting to crop up, that this was a book that you should read, definitely. That was better than a lot of other Marvel's monthly comics that were coming out. Only the kind of weird writer, author, genius that I'm talking about will cause that kind of a change in the word of mouth. And that happened with Captain Marvel. Very briefly, it did. Jim Starlin decided that he had to give his character more cosmic powers, something called a cosmic awareness. And he also decided that his character needed a visual brush-up. We're keeping the super gay costume, but we're adding something that really says 1970s. Mike is too young to remember the Farrah Fawcett hairdo, but a lot of you will remember it, and Captain Marvel gets it. And the Farrah Fawcett hairdo won't work if you've got silver hair, so he changed his hair color. He just changes his hair color so that he has the Farrah Fawcett do, but he now has blonde hair. And that's just it. We were just told, apparently I've got new powers and a new hair. But look at that. Just you also get the sparkly wake that he leaves when he flies. Captain Marvel can now fly. He's got these wristbands that give him superpowers, and he has this cosmic awareness that Starlin just gives it his all here. I know that I'm a little bit distracted here because I want to find, there's one panel that I want to find, and I don't know if I will. I don't know that yeah, there we go. Starlin imitates the Last Supper. he gives a superhero version of Da Vinci's The Last Supper. And again, you can see he loves these recap pages, just loves them. Not only does he love doing them, but they become more and more necessary because he's telling more and more complex stories. And those stories culminate. You've got a gigantic battle between Captain Marvel and Thanos, but they also culminate off stage. The culmination of this storyline is in 2 annuals. Avengers annual and then Marvel 2-in-1 annual. I think it was one of the first times that Marvel ever continued a story between annuals without dipping into the regular monthly comic books. Annuals used to come out once a year. There were bigger issues. There was a gigantic storyline there in which Captain Marvel and Adam Warlock, another signature character, a cosmic character that Jim Starlin had his hands all over. Again, he took an older character that was weird and derivative and no one knew what to do with and transformed it. In that storyline, Adam Warlock and Captain Marvel and the Avengers fight Thanos and defeat him. And it's a great storyline. I've praised it a million times on this channel. I don't know if Mike and I will get to it. Probably we will someday. It's not part of this, because it's not part of Captain Marvel. It is a big part of Captain Marvel's story, and it is crucial in these issues. It's referred to many, many times. But once that happens, once that climaxes, we go back to the normal Captain Marvel. And this is... this issue here has him facing off against the Watcher. But it starts with a reprint of the first appearance in Marvel Superheroes. So that, you get the whole run here. There's Captain Marvel and Commander Yon-Rogg and Uhura. There they are, approaching Earth. You get this classic scene of Gene Colan where Marvel leaps from the ship with the help of his jetpack. But Starlin is gone. He's largely gone by this point. He crops up now and again, but in his place we get Al Milgrom, which is when you know that you're in trouble. If Al Milgrom or George Tuska shows up on the artworks, you know you're in trouble. You know that interest has faded in your comic. The only added thing here, when it comes to that sort of warning sign, is that somehow or other the editorial powers that be at Marvel dug up Wayne Boring to draw some of the issues, these later issues of Captain Marvel. Wayne Boring draws some of them. You might not know the name, but he was a classic canonical Superman artist. And when I saw him on these issues, I had no idea that he was still alive. And it didn't help. Nothing helped. You can see Pat Broderick comes on to do the artwork, but you can see that this is just a dying comic book. Nobody's interested in it anymore. And it did die. And it wasn't the only thing. Because Jim Starlin was so invested in the character of Captain Marvel. His Captain Marvel. You can effectively call it that. Roy Thomas might have came up with a lot of ideas, but Jim Starlin came along and made the character his own. Did the same thing with Adam Warlock. He was so caught up with the character that he managed to pitch to the powers that be at Marvel Comics a storyline in which the character dies of cancer. Marvel Comics honored it by making it their very first graphic novel, The Death of Captain Marvel, written and drawn by Jim Starlin. I've talked about this on this channel before. I don't think Mike and I have ever done an issue of Epic Comic Book Wednesday devoted to The Death of Captain Marvel, but we should, because it and that two-parter of Avengers Annual and Marvel 2-in-1 Annual are really the pinnacle of what Jim Starlin was doing with these 1970s-style comic book cosmic heroes. Those two things really are the pinnacle. There are no pinnacles in Captain Marvel, the comic book. The issues where Starlin is writing and drawing them are really, really good, but there aren't many of them. And they are sandwiched between mountains of crap. And we'll talk about The Death of Captain Marvel. We'll do a video. I'm sure that we can do a video about it on its own. But eventually the Captain Marvel title was canceled. Marvel had already established the rights. They had already established all that they needed to do, and fans weren't interested. And the character was revived. Monica Rambeau was given the name Captain Marvel for a long while in the Avengers and in Spider-Man. But then decades passed, and then the new powers that be at Marvel Comics, new editorial people, said the same thing that guy at Marvel had said 40 years before, which is, hey, our name is Marvel Comics. Surely our flagship character should be Captain Marvel. And you might think, well, wouldn't that be a problem since Monica Rambeau never took off as a character and Captain Marvel is dead, famously dead, dead in a comic book masterpiece. So they decided to christen another character as Captain Marvel. And who was that character? Carol Danvers, the supporting Lois Lane character in Captain Marvel's own book. She was a superhero character. She has had many, many different names: Ms. Marvel, Binary, Warbird. Eventually, they decided to rechristen her Captain Marvel. And unbelievably, they did the exact same thing. I don't think in this case it was a question of legal or, the business end of the company. In this case, I think it was social justice warrior ideological politics. But they did the exact same thing. They decided that fans would love this character. They decided this is not only the most powerful character in the Marvel Universe, a million longtime fans saying, the Hulk? Thor? The Silver Surfer? These writers who had never written comic books before were saying, no, she's more powerful than any of them. And always has been. Didn't you notice? Not only is she the most powerful character in the Marvel Universe, but she's also the most popular character in the Marvel Universe. We're not saying that we've observed this. We're telling you this. We're telling you that this Carol Danvers Captain Marvel is the most popular character in the Marvel lineup. Far more popular than Wolverine or Spider-Man. We're telling you that. So go along. You now have your orders. This character is the most popular character in Marvel. She is our new, and they did it all over again, Marvel's newest sensation. I will use female in air quotes, the female Captain Marvel was not popular. This is a character whose book has been canceled 10 times for low sales. And you would think, again, if you don't follow any of this, if you're a normal person who's not an ideologue, you would think, okay, well, a comic book company is in business to make money. So if they come out with a comic book with a character and a concept and fans don't like it and they have to cancel the book for a lack of sales, they won't do it again. They'll retool the character, have them guest star in a team book or something like that. Nope. Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, Mr. Marvel has been canceled for low sales 10 times and brought back exactly the same 10 times. It just happened again. I think she's on issue number 4 of a comic that is selling 200 issues a month, something like that. No one's interested in it. No one is interested in this character. But once again, the powers that be said, here's a dead body. Bring it alive. Make it live. We're going to do this. We want this to do this. Not only is this character our franchise name, but also the future is female. Men suck. So this is now going to be our flagship character, and the fans are going to love it. Do it. Just make it happen. Whenever decisions like that are made, they fail. You can see it day and night between that corporate decision that gave us that dorky character in white and green costume who has to drink, KO Pectate every hour, and the cosmic character, the Farrah Fawcett hairdo Jim Starlin character that's alive with creativity. It bursts with the fact that its writer very much wants to write this character, very much believes in it. Day and white contrast. And it worked. It always does. When you get that kind of passion, fans respond to it. When you don't have it, they don't. But in this case, it doesn't matter because the ideologues, the SJW ideologues who currently run Marvel Comics and infest it from the top down, are proud of low sales. If fans hate it, that means they're, as they say, pissing off the right people. Unbelievable that this would ever become an accepted way to do business in any part of America, but it is the way Marvel does business. They're proud of it. And they took as an added scalp on their wall the fact that the first Captain Marvel, this fake, we're not even talking fake Captain Marvel, we're talking fake Captain Marvel, when her first movie made $1 billion. Now, I don't want to be all conspiracy theory here, but I watched that phenomenon carefully. The standard explanation for why the Captain Marvel movie made $1 billion is because it was sandwiched between the two parts of Avengers Endgame. The 2 highest grossing movies of all time, the 2 highest grossing superhero movies of all time, the 2 best superhero movies of all time. And it was sandwiched between, and fans were thinking, there's got to be something important here. We don't want to miss this movie. And that explains the ticket, the sales receipts, even though the movie itself is bad. Really, really bad. And also man-bashing and canon revising and idiotic. And soulless. Definitely the cinematic equivalent of a soulless top-down corporate decision of a movie. Okay, that's the standard explanation. I don't buy it, and I haven't bought it from the beginning. The first week that Captain Marvel was in the theaters, the internet was absolutely full of pictures of empty theaters. I don't believe those numbers. And I think in 10 years, 20 years, whenever the final history is made, whenever the non-disclosure agreements run out or whatever, I think the truth will come out that it didn't make that money legitimately. That somehow or other that was artificially amped up. I don't know, back at the time, I didn't know anyone that was harding out to see the Captain Marvel movie in the theater. Anyone. I think my surly houseboy did. Now, he might have been the only one. And I'm pretty sure that he reported an empty theater. There were pictures all over the internet, all over the country, of empty theaters in the first weekend, when they should have been crammed full if you're going to make $1 billion. Leave that aside. It was a perfect example that the dictum holds true. That kind of corporate decision that's handed down from the top does not work. You cannot make people like something. So Captain Marvel is still being published by Marvel Comics. You'd never know it. I don't think there are more than 2 or 3 people who read it. Once upon a time, as I've mentioned before in Epic Comic Book Wednesday, once upon a time, if a comic book sold, I don't mean ship, I mean if it sold fewer than 40,000 issues a month, it would be immediately canceled. Stan Lee would be on the phone to the editor saying, "Pull it. You've got outstanding work. We can work something out with the writer or the artist. We'll pay him something, or we'll run it somewhere else. But pull it. We're not publishing this again. We're throwing money down the sink." 40,000. I think Captain Marvel ships 5,000 issues, and I don't think it sells more than 200 copies. I need proof to believe that. No one talks about it. No one cares about it. The character is thoroughly unlikable. And that wasn't, as you could see, that wasn't much to go on. You weren't starting with much. Jim Starlin took this static cardboard character, made him interesting, worked a storyline where he is a champion fighting for the cosmos against someone who wants to destroy all life, kills that villain, and then kills his hero. So it gives you the whole of an arc, and it's wonderfully done. But then it was over. As far as I know, Captain Marvel, the guy, is still dead in Marvel continuity. I don't think they've ever brought him back. But Michael K. Vaughan would probably know. I'm sure that there's a $150 hardcover omnibus out there of this crap. I'm sure that there is. And if there is, I'm sure that he has it. But he would probably know. Although I don't think he keeps up with modern comics any more than I do, so maybe not. But that is our character for today, which is an object lesson to all of you out there, especially you comic book fans. If a character is a top-down corporate decision, that character will be bad. The only thing that will allow it to be saved is if some weirdo comes on board to make it something special. That is also true with also ran, boring type characters that weren't derivative, but it especially applies with the ones that are, whether that character is Captain Marvel or Man-Thing or Daredevil or whatever it is. You need a weirdo genius to come on board and say, "I can make something with this if you'll let me." So that is our Epic Comic Book Wednesday for today. It's Captain Marvel. Not the real Captain Marvel, much less the real Captain Marvel's dreamy sidekick, but instead 2 fake Captain Marvels. I'm just glad that Mike didn't ask me to talk about the Carol Danvers Captain Marvel. At least in the original fake Captain Marvel, she was still a woman. but in her own comic, anyway, at least we didn't do that. The original Marvel, Captain Marvel, the Kree soldier. There are moments of interest in the 40 issues. How many are issues? 60 issues. There are moments of interest. Every once in a while, a good artist would come on board for a little while. And of course, the Starlin period there is signature. That's the only part of this entire run of this character that you really should read. It's going to be a little bit complicated. There's a long and complicated story. But Starlin held it all together, worked it really well. But anyway, that's the kickoff to our Epic Comic Book Wednesday. It's Captain Marvel. Who knows what we'll do next week? We shall see. I will end this for now, and we will reconvene then. Thank you, BookTube.